Hey, muy buenas noches, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well, blessed, and enjoying family. And as always, muchísimas gracias to everyone for you guys' words, prayers, and your amazing support. De corazón se los agradezco. And before I get into the story on hand, muchísimas gracias for the live tonight. Again, it's always a great honor. Bueno, to get into the story on hand, today I want to make it a short one. I disculpen, but I've been asked a lot on my thoughts on Homeboy Hernandez that yesterday he got into it with the Judas out in TJ, and he basically took one of them out. In the life I stated that if it was a Guardia Nacional, it was a done deal. But it wasn't like that. It wasn't a Guardia. It was an Estatal. I guess some type of special unit. Regardless, it was Judicial, right? But nevertheless, let me start off by stating this, due to how many people were asking me on the Lolo, I asked someone, right? No news for Marcas, but anyways, I asked him and basically gave me all the 411, which, I won't try to make sense of it without sticking a foot in my mouth, right? Because it's it's a touchy subject right now, right? For obvious reasons. And let me start off with, Tijuana. Tijuana used to belong to, you guys know, the Ardillas or Aretes, and that stopped, right? At least in the sense of them being the only ones there. The Sinaloa's there, the four letters, and many other small ones, right? That blend into a bigger one. But, as far as the 411 got put amongst them, Homeboy, he wasn't with nobody, right? He has a lot of support, but it has to do with personal friends and familia, right? Which I don't know who they are or what angle, nor do I want to talk about them, right? But regardless, is where the feria trip comes in, right? Because as everybody knows, Mexico, feria moves everything, period, right? That includes Judas. I stated it a lot of times that in Mexico, they're uña mugre, right? They're nail in dirt. So, with this said, why I state the feria part, plus, I got a little nosy with this person because there's a trust thing right there. And basically, the only contact he had with a certain individual was through a known family member that was in touch, and it was to buy not just this gun, but a couple of them, right? Because to be sincere, if I would have been in his position, I would have done the same thing, And it's not to be reckless, but I mean, if you really sit down and just get busted, go do life in prison, try to get away, and if not, get taken out in the midst, Regardless, you're not going back to that hole, right? So, I understand why he did it. And I understand that he's freshly in Mexico, which there's certain guidelines, in Mexico, and one of them is when it comes to comandantes, sargentos, ek from every faction of Judas, because most of the time they're gonna be in someone's pocket, right? Which I'm not stating so in this one, but you guys can read between the lines, right? Nevertheless, homeboy, like I said, I would have done the same thing, right? He had a mapped out plan to where this would happen and he was gonna go balls out, right? Which I can respect that. But another thing is to always be smart, at least to know your surroundings and TJ in the spot. For the reason that like I stated, there's many of them and I'm not gonna throw no type of shade on this capitana from the judicial, right? But he could have been in touch with one or all three of them, right? At the end of the day, her function was with the states, right? So it would benefit all of them, to be sincere, if we just keeping it 1,000. But homeboy had it set up. You know, whoever's taking care of him, he was he's getting love. Just for the fact where it happened. You know, where it happened in that coto or privada, however you want to call it, that you did that from, and from having that house in the back and the different coto rented, that spot where that car with the clothes was at. No, you got it. I'm not really exactly sure on Tijuana, but here, cotos like that, they go for 8 to 12,000. So he had it well set in his head with, either buck down and hoop bang, ya quedé, or he had the plan in case he was able to, wiggle out. And, he did both. But, in this both, he pissed off a lot of people. Not only, first off, the signs, right? Let's look at the signs. When you're working with the faction in Mexico, you will never see that many elements strike up a pad on the reaction. I'm not talking about, guardias nacionales, marinos, them. I'm talking about municipales, estatales. They usually play the gorda, right? Which is, I'll take my sweet time getting there and giving them some quebrada. That's how it looks when they get called off. And I know a lot of people are gonna say, but there was a person that was not allowing the man, and you know, I don't wanna go too much, but if people, I don't know if you were aware how even these individuals, right, Judas or whatever, treated by cartels, you know, before they give that green light, they have to check in, call in, and make sure he isn't protected, right? It could lead to his neck. First off, to a guarachala, right? And if he runs familia, it's just the way Mexico is. But anyways, to the point, homeboy ain't in Baja no more. No need to direct what angle he took, right? But let's just say he's sat where he should have been at from the gate. Tijuana, like I stayed, he could have went and bought that them pieces from a certain faction, right? Which you can do. Here in Mexico, They say it's hard if you know the right people. You go with Fetty in your hand and you can get what you want. Period. No questions asked, but they do read the cartilla, right? You heat up the plaza, you and your whole family are dead. Just what Homeboy did. Now I'm not putting no actions on nobody, right? But he just pissed off a lot of people. Cause let me just rephrase it like this. Homegirl that passed on, like I said, he could have here, right? At least in a sense. Which I'm not throwing dirt on her. I'm just, you know, he heated up the plaza to the point where, you know, even out here in Culiacan, they're feeling the pause. The government ain't allowing them to work. Not to mention, imagine the felt of the pause to get things across. It's a big loss. Just think about it. And then from all three factions, the thing is, Homeboy took off, and you gotta remember, right? And I don't wish nothing bad on him, but you gotta remember the Aretes, the Ardillas, they stay in TJ. But the rest of Mexico almost belongs to the other two people. Word travels fast. And I forgot who I heard him from, but they're right. Tijuas ain't the spot. That should have never been the spot for him, but I understand why, right? Me personally, I never seen no benefit in being in TJ but headaches, right? Drama. Regardless if people could cross over that border and could still chill, that. If you're running for your freedom, then run, right? But anyways, to close this, people ask me a few questions, and not too long, right? You know the question you asked me, not too long. They're on it like flies on tú sabes. And if here at the ranch they know the angle he took, oh, you can best believe there's someone that was handicapped capped due to this bad that he's aware. But what, do it again, let me end with this. With this, I'm not wishing the homie nothing bad. But with this, I'll leave a message, right? I'll get why he did what he did. But do understand, it's as clear as water, now. You have no other option. Go get locked up for life. Don't allow nobody to catch you over here, cause there's worse things than death. So again, it's a good inside look on how we think when we're in the state. I'll be honest, even though I came since little kid and I was aware of my family, you're over there and you're going through, prison, shooting, stabbings, heck, wars and however, you think of Mexico, I'm gonna go to Mexico y va a estar de papita, right? It's a huge mistake in Mexico. Don't get misguided. I wish this vato really, he's a smart individual. I mean, look, but Tijuas is just not the place. And I'm not gonna advise you to go ahead and shake, because again, Mexico is big, but it's small, if you get what I'm trying to say. But just stay trucha, be wise for those that try to feed some BS, Everywhere is different, especially out here. Anyways, I hope I made sense. I don't want to make this too long. I hope everybody got what I was trying to put out. Disculpen, I can't really touch on names for obvious reasons, right? And I hope you understand. Just stay true to yourself and loyal to your loved ones. Muy buenas noches.